Friends, welcome back. History, as we know it, is more than just cold artifacts in a museum or dry dates in a textbook. It is a vast, dark ocean. The surface glitters with the deeds of emperors and the victors of great battles. But beneath that shimmering layer lie the stories that were forgotten, stories that are more real, more raw, and far more human. On our journey tonight, I'll be your guide as we dive deep into this ocean to explore 4 distinct worlds, each one glimmering with the stubborn light of the human spirit. First, we will plunge headfirst into the muck and mire of the Middle Ages to live a single, authentic day in the life of a common person, a life of plagues, punishments, and pottage. You will discover that the castles and chivalry Hollywood sold you are a beautiful, polished lie. Next, we will rise from that anonymous suffering and turn our gaze to the glittering, treacherous courts of 18th century Russia to witness how one German princess, through sheer intellect and ambition, forged herself into an icon, Catherine the Great. Then, we will journey across time and continents, deep into the humid jungles of Mesoamerica to the Mayan ruins of Palenque. There, we will seek the truth of the Red Queen, a powerful woman shrouded in a crimson mystery, whose power was written not in histories, but in ritual and in silence. And for our final stop, we will step into that vibrant blue house in Mexico, into the world of a legendary painter. We will see how she transformed a broken body and a life of torment into a revolution of immortal art and defiance. This is a long journey into survival, power, mystery, and creation. So, before we begin, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1325. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? So are the fleas. Your bed is a half-rotted straw mattress stuffed with bugs and hay that smells like a barn floor because it was a barn floor 3 months ago. There's no memory foam, no pillows, and definitely no Egyptian cotton sheets. Just a wool blanket that hasn't been washed since last winter and now weighs roughly as much as a small cow from the accumulated grime. You blink awake as the church bell clangs in the distance. It's the medieval version of an alarm clock, only louder and somehow even less merciful. It tolls not just the hour, but a divine command. Time to rise, time to labor, time to pray. Your home is a wooden hut with 1 room, no windows, and a charming open-concept floor plan where your family, livestock, and domestic insects all share the same space. The air is thick with the sweet, acrid smell of wood smoke from the central hearth, a fire that never truly goes out and coats the inside of the thatched roof with a layer of black, sticky soot. This smoke is your only protection against the swarms of insects in the summer, and your only source of warmth in the winter. The floor is packed earth, cold and damp. The smell, oh, it's a fragrant symphony. A subtle blend of stale beer, human sweat, goat, and something you pray isn't mold but know in your soul probably is. Scented candles haven't been invented, and even if they were, they just melt on your dirt floor. You try to stretch but immediately regret it, because the air is freezing and your joints ache. You're 22 years old, which in medieval terms is roughly middle-aged. Your spine cracks like an old wooden door, and your knees sound like a bag of rocks being shaken by a confused peasant. Getting out of bed is a gamble. The floor is either wet from last night's rain, which leaks through the thatched roof, or crusty from something your neighbor's chicken did. Either way, your bare feet are now part of the ecosystem. Oh, and privacy? What's that? Your entire family, parents, siblings, and maybe a random cousin who just never left are waking up beside you. There's no bedroom, no curtains, no me time, just communal everything. You hear your mother already coughing by the fire, your father sharpening a tool, a younger sibling crying softly. Welcome to morning in medieval Europe, where you're never truly alone because parasites, rodents, and 8 other people are always with you. And this is just how your day starts. It only gets worse from here. So, you've managed to crawl out of your medieval haystack of horrors. Congrats. Now, nature calls. And it's not calling politely, it's screaming. Here's the part where you start missing the modern bathroom. There's no toilet, no seat, no toilet paper, no flush. Not even a mildly resentful plunger in the corner. In the 14th century, relieving yourself is an adventure, a social experiment, and often a small public event. If you're a peasant, your bathroom is likely a wooden bucket behind the house, which is already full because Uncle Wolfstan had a rough night after eating bad turnips. The smell is biblical. You hold your breath, do your business, and then here's the kicker. Toss it into the street. Yes, the street. You're supposed to shout something like, "Gardez-vous," before dumping it out the window. That's Old French for, "watch out below." Although, frankly, no one ever moves fast enough. Streets in medieval towns are open sewers, a charming river of human waste, animal droppings, and mystery liquids you'd rather not examine. If you're lucky enough to live in a town with public latrines, congratulations. You get to sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers in an outhouse where privacy is a myth and ventilation is a cruel joke. You might make small talk, but try not to breathe too deeply. Toilet paper? Never heard of it. Most people wipe with straw, leaves, rags, moss, or if they're feeling especially indulgent, a scrap of wool. Sometimes, nothing at all. Which might explain why handshakes weren't popular yet. And if you're in a castle, surely it's better, right? Well, sort of. You might have a garderobe, a hole in the wall that drops your waist directly into the moat. Great idea, except that your enemies know this. And yes, attackers sometimes climbed in through the waste chute. Talk about entering through the back door. So whether you're a farmer or a baron, medieval toileting is a humiliation ritual. It's cold, it's public, it's dangerous, and it's never not disgusting. One slip on a wet stone path and you're face first in humanity's leftovers. And you still haven't brushed your teeth, but we'll get to that next. You survived the toilet. You deserve a reward, right? Maybe a nice breakfast, something warm, delicious, comforting. Sorry, this is medieval Europe. Nothing is comforting here. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a grim affair. There are no eggs, Benedict, no coffee machines sputtering awake, and certainly no avocado toast. You sit down or squat near the fire to a wooden bowl of something that looks like it was scraped off a muddy boot. Welcome to your daily ration of pottage. Pottage is a thick, gloopy stew made of whatever you can find. Grains, root vegetables, maybe a few beans if you're lucky. It's been simmering in the same pot for days, sometimes weeks, and new ingredients are just dumped on top of the old ones. It's less of a recipe and more of an ongoing edible experiment. On the side, a hunk of bread so hard it could deflect arrows. It's made from coarse rye or barley flour, often bulked up with sawdust, ground up acorns, or other creative ingredients, because wheat is a rich man's fantasy. This loaf is not your friend. You don't slice it. You negotiate with it. What about drinks? You're not sipping orange juice or an oat milk latte. You're drinking beer. Yes, beer. At 6:00 a.m. Why? Because the water is teeming with parasites and filth. So, you start your day with weak ale, low alcohol, high survivability. Kids drink it too. No one's happy about it, but at least it won't kill you immediately. Want some meat or cheese? Dream on. That's for Sundays and saints' feast days, and only if your lord is feeling generous. Most peasants don't eat meat more than a few times a year. As for fresh fruit, only when it's in season and not already fermented into wine. And don't even think about spices unless you're royalty. A pinch of pepper costs more than your monthly wages. Salt is valuable enough to be locked away. So you chew your gritty bread, gulp your medieval beer, and try not to think about the rat that may have nibbled your pottage in the night. Breakfast doesn't energize you, it just happens to you. And now that you're properly underfed, it's time to work like your life depends on it, because it absolutely does. So, you've eaten your sad medieval breakfast, and now it's time to get dressed. Not that it'll help. Your wardrobe consists of exactly one outfit. One, it's a rough wool tunic or linen shift that you've worn every day for months, possibly years. There's no such thing as seasonal fashion. There's just wear this until it disintegrates or gives you a fungal infection. Underwear? Optional. If you're lucky, maybe a linen under tunic. If you're not, well, you're going commando under layers of scratchy, sweaty wool, all lovingly stitched together by someone who probably had no idea what a seam was supposed to look like. There's also no washing machine, no soap, and absolutely no dry cleaner in sight. So your clothes are stained, stiff, and scented like a compost pile that's been left to marinate in a pigsty. Even if you wanted to wash them, it's not easy. You'd have to haul water from a river or well, heat it over a fire, scrub your tunic on a board with ashes or lye, and hang it in the sun, which is out approximately 3 days a year. And don't get me started on shoes. If you own any, they're made of untreated leather, barely stitched together, and offer as much arch support as a banana peel. Most peasants just go barefoot, through mud, through dung, through medieval landmines, aka sharp rocks and disease puddles. All this means one thing: your skin hates you. You itch constantly. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs live rent-free on your body. Everyone has them. Nobles, lousy monks, itchy children, walking insect farms. No one escapes. You'll be scratching your armpit with a wooden spoon while chatting with the local priest, and no one will even bat an eye. Your skin is raw from rubbing, your scalp a battlefield of bites. And if you develop a rash, well, too bad. There's no dermatologist, no hydrocortisone, no one to tell you it's probably scabies. You just keep on suffering. And if you're lucky enough to not get an infection, great. That rash will simply accompany you for the next 6 months like an unwanted medieval sidekick. Now that you're dressed in misery and wrapped in discomfort, it's time to head outside and start working yourself to death. Now that you're fully dressed in itches and damp wool, it's time to flash that morning smile. Except you don't, because in the Middle Ages, smiling is a dangerous game. Not emotionally, dentally. There's no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no mouthwash, no floss. The concept of oral hygiene is about as popular as bathing, which is to say, not very. Some people might chew on a twig or rinse with wine or vinegar, but for the most part, your teeth are on their own, and they're not doing well. By the time you hit your mid-20s, your smile looks like something pulled from a haunted crypt. Cavities are rampant, gums are swollen, and those aren't just food stains on your teeth. That's decay. You have more rot in your mouth than a medieval root cellar. Sugar, while not yet everywhere, is becoming more common among the rich. Imported at great cost, mostly used in small cakes or to show off wealth. If you're a noble, congratulations. You get to rot your teeth faster than the peasants. If you're poor, you'll do it slowly over time with fermented bread, gritty pottage, and years of hard chewing. Toothaches? Get used to them. They're like medieval weather, always there in the background. The kind of pain that makes you consider praying, drinking, or pulling the tooth out yourself with a pair of pliers. And that's not a joke. That was the actual treatment. Dentists didn't really exist, but barber surgeons did. Yes, the same guy who cuts your hair is also pulling your molars out by candlelight with an iron hook and zero anesthesia. Infected tooth? Hope you like fevers. Because without antibiotics, it can easily turn into sepsis and kill you from a toothache. That's right, the same thing that sends us to a pharmacy today could be your funeral in the 1300s. And there's no relief on the social front either. Kissing? Good luck. Halitosis, bad breath, is everywhere. If you're single, you're not judged by your smile. You're judged by your land and your livestock. In short, your mouth is a battlefield, and it's losing the war. Now that your teeth are throbbing, let's head outside. Because your real job, the one that will break your back, is just getting started. time to head to work. Except there's no office, no desk, no coffee break, and no chance of promotion. Your job, if you're like 90% of the population, is simple. Don't die while laboring for someone else's comfort. You're a peasant. Congratulations. That means you work the land that belongs to a lord who probably doesn't remember your name. You rise with the sun and stop only when it disappears behind the trees. Your tools? A wooden hoe, a rusty sickle, and whatever bones are still intact in your body. There's no weekend. There's no clocking out. There's only sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Sunday is off, but only if you're not harvesting, fighting off raiders, or praying feverishly for your infected toe to stop turning black. The work is brutal. Fields are plowed by hand or with oxen, if you're rich enough to afford one. You dig ditches, sow seeds, pull weeds, and carry water until your spine begins to resemble the letter S. No one cares if you're tired. No one's asking how your mental health is doing. If you're a woman, surprise, you don't just do field work. You also care for children, clean, cook, spin wool, feed animals, and pretend your husband's lice infestation isn't slowly migrating to your side of the bed. Children? They start helping out around age 5. No school, no toys, just a tiny wooden rake and a dream of one day not dying of the flu. And if you're one of the few who isn't a farmer, maybe you're a blacksmith, a tanner, or a cooper. Great. You still work with fire, chemicals, or animal guts all day in poorly ventilated sheds. The pay? Basically survival. The perks? Occasional bleeding. Break a bone? Too bad. Get a fever? Drink some warm beer and keep going. You can't afford to stop, not even for a day, because if you don't work, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, well, medieval Europe has a solution for that. It's called being replaced. So you grip your shovel, ignore the blisters, and keep digging. Because in the Middle Ages, your job isn't a career. It's a slow-motion endurance test. Now that your back is on fire from laboring in the fields, let's talk about the weather. Because in the Middle Ages, temperature is less about seasons and more about ongoing punishment from the sky. Let's start with winter. There's no insulation, no central heating, and no weather stripping. Just wooden walls with gaps you could throw a chicken through. Your windows are covered with cloth, not glass. The fire in the hearth is nice in theory, but you don't have enough firewood to keep it going, because wood is expensive and gathering it from the Lord's forest is sometimes illegal. Yes, you can be executed for picking up the wrong stick from the wrong forest. You bundle up in your one damp wool tunic, huddle near the dying embers, and still wake up with your nose frozen. Your feet are permanently cold, often damp. Your fingers so stiff they feel like tiny medieval popsicles. Frostbite isn't diagnosed, it's just called bad luck. Now, fast forward to summer. Sounds better, right? Wrong. In summer, your home turns into a clay oven. There's no fan, no cross breeze, and absolutely no deodorant. You sweat through your layers, but you can't remove them because showing too much skin is scandalous and also invites sunburn, insect bites, and social judgment. The flies are out in full force, attracted to your unwashed body and the smell of last week's goat stew that's still fermenting in the corner. Mosquitoes buzz by your ear while you sleep, assuming you can sleep through the sound of your neighbors yelling and babies crying. In the fields, the sun bakes you. No sunblock, no hat, unless you fashioned one out of straw like a desperate scarecrow. And the worst part? You still have to work. Heat stroke is just called taking a bad turn. So you're either shivering in your own hovel, wondering if your toes will make it to spring, or you're sweating through your only pair of socks while your thighs chafe into oblivion. And the one thing that never changes, no matter the season, your clothes still itch, your food is still terrible, and your next chore is still waiting. Welcome to climate control, medieval style. There is none. Feeling thirsty? Need to freshen up? Want to splash a little water on your face to wake up from this damp fever dream of a life? Too bad. In medieval times, water isn't your friend. It's trying to murder you quietly. Let's start with drinking. The nearby stream looks fresh, bubbling, and clear, like something out of a fantasy movie. But spoiler alert, it's not. Upstream, someone just dumped a chamber pot into it. And if not that, then a dead pig is probably decomposing in it. Parasites, bacteria, and the entire microbial army of medieval Europe await in every sip. That's why people drank beer. Yes, beer, even children. But before you imagine medieval kids doing keg stands, understand that it was small beer, weak in alcohol, strong in survival. Brewing boiled the water, so it was safer than whatever flowed through the town ditch. Wine was another option, if you were rich enough to afford it and unconcerned with functioning properly before noon. What about bathing? Surely water was used for cleaning. In theory, yes. In practice, absolutely not. See, back then, people believed bathing actually opened your pores and let the disease in. That's right, washing yourself was considered medically risky. You were cleaner, apparently, if you never removed the protective layer of filth caked onto your skin. Communal bathhouses did exist, but they quickly gained reputations as places for gossip, scandal, and sometimes full-on medieval extracurriculars. So, naturally, the church got involved and shut many down. Even if you did want to bathe, it was a full production. You'd need to fetch water from the well, boil it over a fire, fill a wooden tub that leaked, and then pray no one else in the house used it before you, or worse, after. And rainwater collected in open barrels, where birds poop, insects breed, and moss thrives. Sounds refreshing, doesn't it? So whether it's going in your mouth, on your body, or onto your crops, water in the Middle Ages is less of a life source and more of a gamble. One wrong gulp and you're spending your final days sweating in a straw bed, clutching your stomach, and contemplating all your life choices. Next time you sip tap water, raise a glass for our ancestors. They didn't have the luxury of hydration without hazard. So you drank the water, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you just stubbed your toe on a rock shaped like disappointment. Either way, you're sick. You need help. You need a doctor. Too bad you live in the Middle Ages, where medicine is really just polite torture with a theology degree. Let's start with the diagnosis. Everything wrong with you, whether it's a cough, rash, broken bone, or the creeping plague, is caused by your humors being out of balance. The 4 humors were blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to medieval science, your health depends on keeping them balanced, like some sort of internal soup. Got a fever? Too much blood. The answer? Bloodletting. That's right. Let's drain your life force into a bowl using a dull blade or a hungry leech. And yes, barbers were often the ones doing it. Imagine getting a haircut and a hemoglobin extraction in one sitting. 2 for 1, baby. Feeling sad or anxious? That's clearly an excess of black bile. The cure? Laxatives. Maybe a warm herbal purge, or just prayers and a cold compress while everyone avoids eye contact with you and starts carving your coffin. Now, if you break a bone or get a nasty wound, you're in real trouble. There's no anesthesia unless you count passing out from pain. Surgery is done with knives that haven't been cleaned since the Crusades. Tools are heated over fire not for sterilization, but because they just look scarier that way. Antibiotics? Centuries away. Germ theory? Not invented yet. They think disease comes from bad air, or God being annoyed with your moral failings. Got a stomach ache? Must have been your sinful thoughts. Hope you like confessing while vomiting. If your condition gets worse, you'll be treated with more leeches, possibly some crushed beetles, and a priest at your bedside giving last rites just in case. At this point, they're preparing for the cure known as death. And if by some miracle you recover, everyone just assumes God took pity on you. The doctor takes full credit, and the leech gets promoted. So yes, in the Middle Ages, medicine is less about healing and more about surviving the cure. After a long day of labor, lice, and leeches, it's finally time to eat. You shuffle back to your hovel, stomach growling, ready for the one joy left in life, a warm meal. Bad news. Your meal is probably trying to kill you. Let's begin with the basics. Food preservation doesn't really exist. There's no fridge, no freezer, just salt, smoke, or the hope that winter air keeps things fresh. Your meat, if you're lucky enough to have any, has been hanging for days, covered in flies, marinated in questionable brine, and possibly shared with a rat or two. Bread is the cornerstone of the medieval diet, but even that isn't safe. In bad harvest years, desperate peasants bulk it up with bark, sawdust, or even clay to make it stretch. And if it's rye season, there's a bonus: ergot, a fungus that causes convulsions, hallucinations, and sometimes death. It's like eating bread laced with LSD and tetanus. Vegetables? Only if they're in season. And you know what's always in season? Turnips. So many turnips. Boiled, mashed, or floating in pottage, which, if you remember, is basically a hot swamp of mystery ingredients that's been simmering since your great-grandfather's funeral. Fruit might be available in the fall, but it rots quickly, and sugar is rare, expensive, and hoarded by the rich to show off their blackened teeth. Dairy is another gamble. Fresh milk spoils in hours. Butter and cheese fare better, but they're loaded with bacteria. People eat them anyway because, frankly, it's either that or chew your boot leather. And let's talk about seasoning. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, or nutmeg, worth more than gold. For the average peasant, flavor comes from onions, salt if you're lucky, and pain. Most meals taste like wet burlap sprinkled with sadness. But food isn't just a health hazard, it's a political one. Game animals belong to the Lord, not you. Caught poaching a rabbit? You could be fined, imprisoned, or even executed. That's right, your dinner could get you hanged. So as you sit down to eat your gray stew by flickering firelight, remember every bite is a risk. But you eat anyway, because in the Middle Ages, food doesn't nourish, it tests you. It's evening now. You've worked, suffered, and barely digested your suspicious stew. You might think the day is winding down, but don't get too relaxed, because God is watching. So is the priest, and so is your neighbor Agnes, who will absolutely rat you out if you miss Mass. In medieval Europe, religion isn't just part of life, it is life. The church controls your calendar, your laws, your education, if you can read, your birth, marriage, death, and everything in between. Think of it as your spiritual landlord, and you're always behind on rent. Every day is structured around prayer bells. The town church bell rings in the morning, noon, and night, not because people need reminders, but because missing prayer is a sin. Forget to bow? Sin. Eat meat on a Friday? Sin. Think about your neighbor's wife in that one dream? Double sin. And yes, hell is very real, vividly real. Priests describe it in glorious detail: rivers of fire, lakes of boiling blood, demons with pitchforks, and eternal wailing. If the plague doesn't scare you, eternal damnation definitely will. You can't read the Bible yourself because it's written in Latin, a language reserved for monks, clergy, and that one noble kid who's too good for dirt. You rely on the church to interpret everything for you. That means if the priest says your crop failure is because you didn't pray hard enough, well, time to kneel harder. Tithes, 1/10 of everything you own, are mandatory. If you grow wheat, you give wheat. If you raise chickens, you give eggs. If you have nothing, congratulations. You're spiritually bankrupt and financially doomed. Holidays? They're holy days, dozens of them. And while they offer breaks from labor, they're not for fun. They're for attending Mass, fasting, confessing sins, and reminding yourself that joy is a dangerous indulgence. Questioning the church is dangerous. Heretics are burned, witches are drowned, blasphemers are flogged, and skeptics are quickly reformed. So you go through the motions, you chant, you bow. You pray that your soul, after enduring this dirt-covered life, might finally land in paradise, assuming the priest likes you. Because in the Middle Ages, God may be merciful, but the church? Not so much. If you thought being a medieval peasant was rough, try doing it as a woman. All the filth, famine, and fear, plus childbirth, subservience, and social invisibility. In the Middle Ages, being a woman is like being on hard mode with no health potions and no restart button. From birth, a girl's life path is pretty much locked in. Marry young, bear children, serve your husband, die tired. Education? Not likely. Unless you're from a noble family and sent to a convent, your intellectual development stops around the time you learn how to churn butter and patch a tunic. Marriage happens early, really early. It's not weird to be betrothed at 12 and pregnant by 14. It's not about love. It's about land, livestock, and alliances. Your opinion? Not required. Once married, you're basically your husband's property. Your job is to produce heirs, feed everyone, keep the house running, and not complain. Because complaining might get you branded a nag, or worse, a witch. That label comes with a complimentary drowning or burning, depending on local fashion. Childbirth is a death lottery. There's no prenatal care, no sterile tools, no anesthesia. Midwives do their best, but even minor complications can mean death for the mother, the child, or both. Some women survive 10 pregnancies. Many don't survive 2. But don't worry, once the baby is out, your work increases. Now you have a screaming infant in a lice-ridden hut, and you're expected to nurse, cook, clean, and still help in the fields. You don't get a break. You are the break for everyone else. If you're unmarried, you're suspicious. If you're widowed, you're vulnerable. If you're outspoken, you're dangerous. Women who didn't conform were often accused of witchcraft, especially if they had herbal knowledge, a strong personality, or just looked at someone funny on a rainy Tuesday. Even in the church, your role is limited. Nuns lived under strict rules, no speaking without permission, no freedom of movement, and your spiritual worth always ranked below men. In short, if you're a woman in the Middle Ages, you're expected to endure, obey, reproduce, and suffer in silence, ideally while smiling, because even in a time of universal suffering, women were somehow expected to suffer gracefully. So far, you've battled filth, starvation, social injustice, and possibly a goat. But just when you think your day can't get any worse, here comes violence. Loud, bloody, and often completely acceptable by medieval standards. Let's be clear. The Middle Ages were not peaceful. The idea of law and order mostly meant hope the local lord isn't in a bad mood. Violence is everywhere, in the home, in the streets, on the battlefield, in church disputes, and sometimes in line at the communal bread oven. Crime is common, punishment is brutal, and justice is more performance art than protection. Steal a loaf of bread, you could lose a hand. Accused of lying, your tongue might get pierced. Gossip too much, meet the scold's bridle, a metal mask strapped to your head with a bar in your mouth. For correction, of course. Let's say you're accused of something serious. Heresy, theft, witchcraft. How do you prove your innocence? By being tortured, obviously. Welcome to trial by ordeal. One version, you stick your hand in boiling water to retrieve a stone. If it heals without infection in 3 days, you're innocent. If not, you're guilty. Another option, you're tossed into a river. If you sink, you're innocent and probably dead. If you float, you're guilty and will be punished anyway. It's like a medieval game show where the prize is survival and the host is actively rooting against you. And if you're sentenced to death, that's a public event. Executions are performed in front of cheering crowds, hangings, beheadings, burnings. Sometimes people bring snacks. It's the medieval equivalent of cable TV. Domestic violence? Completely normal. Husbands were allowed, even expected, to discipline their wives and children. Street fights? Commonplace. You could be beaten just for looking the wrong way at a noble's horse. And war, always simmering. Local feuds, territorial disputes, religious crusades. Someone's always marching off to stab someone else in the name of honor, God, or boredom. Violence isn't a breakdown of society in the Middle Ages. It is society. Everyone lives with the constant knowledge that life is fragile, justice is arbitrary, and your neighbor might bash your head in over a pig. So walk carefully, keep your eyes down, and never trust anyone with a club. At this point, you've made it through the lice, the leeches, the laundryless misery, and the looming threat of public disembowelment. But now comes the final chapter of most medieval lives, an early and unglamorous death. If you're alive and still breathing past the age of 40, you're practically a celebrity. You might even be referred to as the Old One, which is less of a nickname and more of a statistical miracle. Let's break it down. The average life expectancy hovers around 30-40 years, but that number is dragged down heavily by infant mortality. Nearly half of all children died before reaching age 5. Disease, malnutrition, or one bad winter was all it took. No vaccines, no antibiotics, no hope. If you survived childhood, you entered adulthood already exhausted. Work began as soon as you could walk upright, and by 25, your joints creaked like a monastery door. You might be missing several teeth, a finger, and most of your original optimism. Women faced a particularly deadly gauntlet, childbirth. It was one of the leading causes of death for medieval women. No pain relief, no medical intervention, just prayer, hot water, and someone holding your hand while you bled out on a straw-stuffed cot. For men, the dangers were different but equally relentless. Farming accidents, infections from minor wounds, a neighbor's drunken rage, a crusade gone sideways. Even walking to the market could be risky if you crossed paths with a bored bandit or an angry tax collector. Death could also come quietly from the plague, which turned cities into cemeteries overnight, or from famine, which could last entire seasons, thinning out entire villages. Or from bad luck, like eating spoiled grain and spending your final hours hallucinating and screaming at the walls. And funerals? You were lucky if you got one. Bodies were often buried quickly to avoid disease. No embalming, no polished coffins, just a hole, a few murmured prayers, and a shallow mound of earth, if there was enough space left in the churchyard. So yes, in medieval times, life was brutal, short, and constantly under siege by death in all its casual forms. You didn't retire, you just stopped showing up. So, how's your day been? You've woken up in filth, relieved yourself into a bucket, brushed your teeth with wishful thinking, nearly passed out from hunger, worked until your spine cried for mercy, scratched your way through itchy wool, prayed to not get plague, and barely dodged a public execution for owning a squirrel. Welcome to a single day in medieval Europe. Still dreaming of becoming a knight? Think again. That romanticized version of the Middle Ages, gallant swordsmen, noble ladies in towers, heroic battles and feasts in candlelit great halls. It's a myth, polished by fairy tales and fantasy books. In truth, the medieval world was gritty, cruel, and deeply unfair. Hierarchy was everything. If you were born poor, you stayed poor. If you were born rich, congratulations. You had a better chance of surviving, but you were still one bad soup away from dysentery and a hasty burial. Even the nobles weren't immune to misery. Castles were drafty stone refrigerators filled with fleas, smoke, and politically motivated marriages. Sure, you had a fur cloak and a goblet of wine, but also a 50% chance of dying in a skirmish or from an infected splinter. Not exactly luxury. The simpler times weren't simple. They were relentless. Everything took longer. Everything hurt more. Everything from childbirth to chewing came with consequences. Life was survival, not leisure. And if you did find a quiet moment to think, to dream, to imagine something better, there wasn't much you could do with it. No upward mobility, no modern medicine, no internet to Google what's this weird rash. You lived, suffered, worked, and died within a 10-mile radius of where you were born. But here's the wildest part. Through all of this, people still laughed, sang songs, told stories, fell in love, and found meaning. Not because life was easy, but because humans are stubborn like that. Even in the darkest chapters, they made space for light. So tonight, when you slip into your clean bed with indoor plumbing, antibiotics, and central heating, maybe say a quiet thank you to the modern world and to your ancestors who fought rats, famine, and feudalism, so you wouldn't have to. Our journey tonight comes to a close. Thank you for joining me on this long journey. Until the whispers of the past call to us again, take care.